Hi everyone, this is our first video of getting into some more advanced techniques. I want to kind of show an overgrown tree in a ruined situation, very similar to some of the ruins of Cambodia, the imagery that was made famous perhaps by Tomb Raider. So this is something that I've done a number of times and, is kind of a cool tree situation. So I wanted to show you guys how I conquer something like this. I'm going to start out with a simple scene. You could imagine that these are high detailed sculpted ruins. This is the roof. You've got a wall, maybe a pillar and a floor. I've already detailed all of this out, but each of these are individual objects. So I want to go into some things that you need to consider when you're doing a tree like this. And in fact, just so we're all clear what we're looking at, let me this type of situation where this thing is like really kind of coming down, it's growing all over stuff, all over itself. This is some cool stuff. So that's what we're looking at. All right. So before I do anything, I have opened ZBrush as well, because what I do once I've sculpted all of these, first I'll organize my layers. I always have an environment layer, and that will have each of my components of my environment. So I've got a ruins layer, I've got a layer specific to my GrowFX. Oftentimes too, I will be I'll start a group once I get into optimizing this, where there's GrowFX Live, GrowFX Baked, if I'm baking down these objects. And then I always have Collision Geo for the GrowFX. I'm not going to grow my tree on top of my high-res Geo. What I am going to do is take all of my geometry that is in my environment ruins. These are my high-res objects, presumably. And I'm going to clone them. And I'm going to add them to this collision geo mesh. Then I'm going to turn off my environment's ruins mesh. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to collapse all of those objects into one thing. Now, this isn't enough. GrowFX hates this area where you would have two faces up on top of itself. It's going to do just nasty stuff in there. So when I'm done with this, I will then export this, and I'm going to go to my drive, take this to ruins collision geo, and I'm going to send that out to ZBrush. And this is another way where Dynamesh is integral in my pipeline and how I do things. I use this a lot for making collision meshes for my plant geo, things like that. I'll even use it for simulations, creating collision geo for like waterfalls or anything like that. Anything where I've sculpted a lot of stuff, and I want to combine it in a meaningful way that will play nice with other applications. I come in and I do this and make it editable, and come into our trusty Dynamesh, and I Dynamesh this. So I've got 42,000 polys. Sure, that'll be fine. You'll notice it's not like 100% accurate, but once you put roots and everything on top of this, it's going to be absolutely fine this way. Of course, then I come back and I go to Decimation Master, pre-process this, because I don't want 42,000 polys, and tweak the little slider just to get it to wake it up. do 15 for this. Actually, I'm going to do way less. I'll do like 8. Perfect. All right, now I go export, and this is where I should have, like I told you guys, created a ZBrush folder, not SBrush, ZBrush. New, and done a decimated. Put this in here. And deci. Okay. All right. Once I've done that, I will come, I delete that mesh that I had created to send out. And I go to the right directory. And bring this back in. Okay, so now I have a mesh that looks like crap, but GrowFX is not going to do all sorts of unexpected weird stuff. What will happen when I start to like grow roots down this, it's going to like climb into here and do all sorts of messed up stuff in those cracks. It'll try its best to solve for those faces that I don't want solved for in the first place. So once I have that, I'm just going to save as. At any point we could crash. Okay, so I've got my collision mesh, and it's not added to the layer. Great. So now I'm going to start building a tree. And I have labeled this GrowFX Hero Trees. It's important to note that this is the same thing I would do for Ivy or anything like that. Once I'm done constructing my environment, I start collapsing stuff down into areas where I'm going to have Ivy grow on. I isolate these areas though, so if I don't need the ground or I don't need a whole bunch of stuff that's over here, the Ivy is growing up the side of this building, then I only bring that in and Dynamesh that. I try to keep it as minimal as possible. Don't Dynamesh your entire environment and then try to grow on top of that. That's not going to be successful. Okay, so I've labeled my tree. I have an icon size of 6 feet, as we talked about, and I'm going to create my first path. I'm going to call this trunk, and with any luck, spell it correctly. All right. So for the moment, I'm going to close my mesh builder, and I'm just going to be working with my distributors and my direction modifiers. So I'm going to create a distributor right out the gate, and let's just make this guy 20 feet. And I'm going to give this a random direction, and for the moment, I'm just going to kind of generally smooth, well, I don't really like the way that looks. So that's probably better. Probably for a tree like this, I generally don't like bring it up all the way and make like that be my main branch. I'll kind of like, I'll use one that diverges or something like that and get something, or sometimes just put like another branch, like one specific that I kind of control, and give this a little bit more contour and shape, just something slightly more interesting. But this is fine for the moment. And then let's check our step size. Okay, so, we're a little dense. But I like that shape. So I'm going to do a optimize steps come in here and crank on this a little bit. Something like that. Alright, so let's say that's my trunk. Now, the next thing I'm going to do once I have the trunk, and you'll notice I started the base of my tree here, up on top, right? Although my tree might be growing all up here, I'm going to create the tree where I want, you know, basically the epicenter of the trunk to be, and I'm going to grow things down from there. So next, I'm going to turn that back on. I'm going to create another distributor, and that's fine. All right, and you'll see this shoots up, you know, a single guy here. And I'll first make him only 2 inches. I'm going to name it Roots. And I'm going to make my count a little bit more, and I'm going to give this an offset of whatever I'm feeling like my roots will be based in, or, you know, kind of how far apart I want them to be. And right now, you know, they're all kind of pointing up. But what I can do is do a hard bend, and it starts by default at position, you know, 20. I'm going to say position 0, and I don't want any chaos in this. I want these guys to just start growing down at position 0. But generally when I'm doing roots like this, I don't actually start them at right at the base. So I want to, where is it? Oh, you know what? I normally do these as a, yep, sorry. Normally, I'll do this as a path position, which seems maybe counterintuitive based on what it gives you by default. But I really just like choke this guy down. No, I don't. Sorry. I do this as a path point distributor. And I add a position, and I make this guy at 0. And then I again will do a count of, let's say, 5 or something like that, and then I give him an offset, you know, something a little bit wider. And I'm going to turn off that collision mesh just so we can see this, and that works out a little bit better. Now what I'll do is I'm going to raise these guys up slightly, because when I go to mesh this, if they're sitting right at the base, it's going to do some funky stuff. And if you bring them up a little bit, it will kind of conform. What I'm going to use when I do this is a meta mesh, and it's going to bleed all of this together. So you want to, you know, this offset is going to be directly relative to the thickness of the trunk that you're trying to use. But in using this point position, this is nice because it gives me, you know, these guys are going down. Well, it's because they have the hard bend on them. If I turn this guy off, they're going to pop up. So my hard bend back on, and then I'm going to, now what you might think is first you want to add a an object reaction, because you want these to react to this object. But remember, order matters here. So first I'm going to send them in some random directions, and I'm going to correct my step size, which was supposed to be 2 inches, not 2 feet. And, you know, maybe something like that is cool. And then to further push these guys down, I'm going to add a down vector. So now they've got some more interesting shape, but they're, you know, too short. So I'm going to make them quite a bit longer. All right, so now we've got these dudes. They're doing their thing. Next, once I've kind of shaped them the way I want, I will come in, and now I'm going to add an object reaction. And I will pick my object, which is going to be this. Now, this guy's got a couple of options. You can reflect, and this is just going to, kind of bounce off. It's not going to make it attract and do some of the more interesting things that it can do. If you turn magnetic on, though, and you start playing with this distance, like let's say I want like 20 feet, so anything within 20 feet, it's going to start to pull toward it. And you can do a couple of things here. You can use vertices, and that will do exactly what it says. It's going to use each of these verts as a point that it can magnetize by. And when you have like a well-distributed surface, something that's like, nicely quad modeled, that's a great way to do that. However, if you have a decimated mesh from ZBrush that looks like this, and you've got these big surfaces with nothing happening, the best thing to do is say generate points per face, and then you can specify how close you want these points to be. And sometimes, yeah, there we go, you can say show magnetic points. And now these, instead of your vertices, are going to be the things that are attracting this mesh to it, which is good because now I'm picking up some points all over those faces. You don't want to keep this on, it really bogs your stuff down. But now I can start to crank this strength, and you'll see like I start to get some cool stuff happening. So this type of interaction, and then pushing this reflect distance a little bit will help some of these like intercolliding areas. And then you can also tweak this, max distance, and maybe crank on this a little bit harder. All right, so for something like this, I probably, these guys, they've got like a weight to them per our picture. They definitely like grow over and down. They don't really go like, these minor guys, they're zigging and zagging, but the major guys, they're really kind of going down. So really want to make sure that they're doing that. So I'm going to go back up to this vector, this down vector, and pull on them a little bit more. I'm also going to bring my offset in just a touch. So maybe that's, what I'm looking for. Something like that. So this would be my first, root system. The other thing that's important, though, once you get into something like this, is you want to introduce some chaos to this. You don't want all of these roots to be the same size. And I'm going to make them quite a bit longer now. And I just play with this generally to kind of get the look that I want. You can change this angle axis, and it's basically like rotating these guys around. I don't really want them on the back side there. The other thing you can do is, if you wanted, you could add another vector. And I'm going to pull that guy up above. And what you can do, let's say you want them coming out this way. So I can come to helpers, not the motion, and come into X level, and I'm going to add a point. And I want to make sure that it's in my GrowFX layer. I'm going to rotate this guy so he's angled in that general direction. Make him a little larger so I can see him. Come back to my tree and go back to the root system, go to this vector, and I'm going to say another global vector, not target point, another global vector, and I'm going to pick that guy. So right now, by default, these guys come in at negative. That's why you saw it like jump over there. But if I say 20, now you'll see these dudes, they're all pushing out in that general direction. So these vectors, they give you a lot of power with like kind of gently guiding or very deliberately guiding things where you want them to go, which is cool. Like you can have a lot of control with those. So I'm just gonna kind of gently push them in the direction that I'm wanting them to go. Okay. So now I've got my like first root system, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy my object reaction, and I'm going to make a R1. So this is a root, like subsidiary 1, and I'm going to create a path distributor and put it on my roots, and it's going to do all sorts of funky stuff. Give it a random direction. Probably set this at like 2 inches. And I'm going to give this a down vector. Again, just to push these guys in the general direction that I want them to go. But right now they're not, you know, interacting with that per se, with the object, because I haven't pasted my object reaction onto them. So then I paste instance, so now all of these roots are going to react in the same way. Now if we look at this plant, or this tree, you know, I kind of want to get this like, you know, crazy roots kind of going on lower, so very similar to what I do with the upper trunk system. I'm going to grow these guys maybe a little bit further down the path, like 20% or something like that, because once we mesh this, anything that's up in here is just going to kind of disappear. And now I might start to crank these settings a little bit more, pull on the strength, maybe not that much. The smaller the step size, obviously, the more accurate this is going to be. And really, nothing's going much beyond 10, 20 feet here. So that should be plenty. Now I want to... And it becomes like a little bit of a balance of messing with your step size to get something a little bit more accurate and nice, and then messing with this max strength. If you don't have a decent step size and you just start cranking on this max strength, you're going to get some kind of funky results, and you're going to wonder why. And the reason why is because you don't have enough steps to kind of tell it where to go. So let's say, you know, I'm digging this, and I'm going to set my density lower. It's not, they're roots, they're not, you know, branches and whatnot. There really are, there's kind of fewer. We can also make like a secondary system up on top of that once we're done, which would be fine. We could make like these are two guys, and we'd make a path distributor again. I'll set this to R1, and maybe these guys I'll set them only to like 5 feet or something like that, and they will start at like 50%, right? And again, same kind of random directions. Tweak these values, not 2 feet. Introduce some chaos. And introduce a down vector. That points down. And then again, instance this object reaction onto there. So now I'm starting to get some, like, you know, some of these other, when we mesh them, these will be like little minor guys. Okay, so for this tutorial, I'm not going to do the upper portion of this tree, because I'm going to do some other trees that'll kind of like demonstrate what I would do here. And I want to keep these kind of focused. So this is really about, like, you know, reacting to the object and, you know, so on and so forth. and getting these like lower root systems, I also want to introduce you guys to MetaMesh here. So once I've got this, let's say this is like cool, I'm totally happy with this. Now I come to my mesh builder and I'm going to use MetaMesh. I don't know why, but it seemed like it needed something more Megatron. And I don't want that on. I'm not going to MetaMesh R2 because he's like a subsidiary or secondary subsidiary. He's a secondary branch. So what I am going to MetaMesh though is the trunk, and I want to view meshes now at this point. And you'll see like, wow, like nothing impressive there. That's not cool at all. And let's put this guy up. Alright, so let's say like, yeah, so what you will see here is like this stuff, this is the mesh trying its best to interpolate. I have like no points from here to here. Remember I told you your step size is going to be directly proportionate to your resolution of your mesh. So I probably took away too many step sizes, because when I go to mesh this guy, you'll see I only have one, one set of edges here, one edge loop there, one edge loop there, and then it's going that entire span with no edge loops. So before I continue on, I'm going to address that. Optimize crazy. So now, I've got something a little bit nicer. But this becomes like, a fine balance here. All right, next I'm going to do my trunks, or my roots. Again, I will MetaMesh this. And now we're going to start to see like, oh, it's going to create a MetaMesh. It's going to take some time. And if you're anything like me, you are entirely impatient. And I'm going to cancel that, because I know what it's doing, and my face size is too small, okay? And it's just like computing up on top of itself and doing crap that I don't want it to do. Which brings us to another good point. Manual update. This guy right here. Once you get into a very high poly tree, into a situation where you've got a lot of dependencies, you're really pushing either a ton of leaves, all these things, you're experimenting with something, and you don't want this to be trying to regrow itself, because that is what it will do. If I changed, let's say I want to change my face size to not 2 feet, 2 inches or 3 inches perhaps. If not 3 feet, I can't type tonight. If I want to change that to 3 inches and I don't have manual update on, it's going to try to regrow every time I make a change. And I don't want that, because I also want to change the face size of my trunk. I want these two to be as close to the same as possible. Alright, so now I'm going to say update. At this point, you'll see it's not updating anymore. So you have to push the update button. And there we go. Way quicker. I took it too far. Looked like a crap. So I'm going to go to 2 inches. And still kind of look like a crap, but what I want to do is I want to get these guys a little bit more the right diameter before I worry too much about what they look like. And update this again. Alright, so now it looks like, you know, lumpy crap. So my offset amount is too much, and perhaps the position that I put it at is also slightly too high. And I want to update that again. All right, starting to get there. Just tweaking that that offset size. Okay, and you know, stuff like this, honestly, I don't mind that. Like, you know, trees do that. Like, you'll get like weird anomalies and lumps and stuff like that. So I'm kind of okay with that. Even some of this, like, these guys do kind of like grow together. See these like details where this is like welded and kind of fused, and that's good. And you know, for something like this, I kind of go for that those details where, you know, things are kind of fusing together. And it's okay because I'm not going to use MetaMesh on every single root system. Now sometimes I might try it for my my R1, my like first secondary root system off of this. I might say MetaMesh, and again face size of 2 inches, and let's update. So this is going to take a little bit longer now. And this is where it becomes a balance. Like, what is it going to... Is it going to be that much better, that much cooler? What distance are you viewing it from? Is the camera right up on top of it? Do you really need, you know, everything to be kind of meta-meshed together? If the answer is it's not going to be right up in front of the camera, and it's not expected to be a super high detail thing, I do not recommend using this. Because you can see, like, you know, it's thinking and thinking and thinking. I also have quite a bit of little secondary roots and whatnot, so might not be the best idea. What I might do instead of this, yes, if it crashes, that's going to be hot. Sometimes it'll do this. Just try to ignore it and see if we can save. Alright. Yeah, you know, so some of that is cool. You can see it was like, you know, midway in the build process and it kind of stops. You know, maybe that could be cool, but if I really, really want to meta mesh these, what I will do is bring this density of that secondary layer down. I'll make 2 of these. So my first one, so it's clear what I'm looking at here, I'm going to turn back on manual update. Okay, my first one, I'll set my density much lower. So these are these blue ones here, or like more purple, not blue. Very clearly not blue. So I might do something like that. So it's got a lot less to calculate, but I still get some of that, like, you know, cool detail. And if I go to mesh that now, this shouldn't take as long. It still might take a little bit. Come on. It's got a lot to think about. Whenever these guys are like crisscrossing and stuff, you know, up here it's just got to solve like this relationship, these guys. But now I've introduced a whole other level kind of combining these meshes that it needs to calculate. And it might be that it's totally worth it, but you got to be patient. This is when I go get coffee. My patience is wearing thin. Chad, you're too impatient. I'm not gonna wait. Probably if I were at work, I might wait for it. I was really committed to that. But even before I, got entire. Look at that. It did it. I canceled it right at the point where it was about to churn it back out for me. And that's pretty cool. Like, I probably should have been more patient and waited for it, but I'm not. So this is what we get. There's still a couple of areas that it didn't quite finish, but still overall, kind of neat. So then at this point, one thing you can do is you can have multiple types of meshes for your GrowFX object. So while I'm working and testing stuff, one thing I might do, I'm going to turn manual update back on while I do this. I might have a meta mesh for something that I'm going to intend to be meta mesh down the road, and I'll tweak those settings, get it dialed in, and then turn it off. And then for speed's sake, I will match it with a cylindrical mesh as well, and turn that guy on, so I don't have to wait all day for my meta meshes to build. Come on. So you'll see, I'm getting this type of stuff, and it's not sewing this all together, but it's still giving me a reasonable representation of what I'm going to get here. And then if I want to turn this on, again, make another cylindrical mesh. I don't even remember what I put my last one at. And update. So now you'll see, we're getting some cool stuff. These other little, minor guys. And really, honestly, I think for this, we really do want that density. So if I found, I want to wait for that density and let it meta mesh. It's good to experiment with it, get the look down with the cylindrical mesh, and then go to a meta mesh once you've got it kind of designed and built out the way you want it to be. So this is what I would do for a ruin this type of tree. This. I might also make two distributors, offset them, make one kind of come into it to make this base a little bit more interesting. You could, nothing says that our first distributor has to be right off the center. You can offset that guy. You could then make a dual trunk situation where one of them kind of comes this way, another one kind of goes that way, and then you meta mesh them together. That's a totally valid thing and can give you some other cool shapes. Don't feel like you have to be locked to this one trunk, because if you look at like this guy, like, man, to describe that, I'd probably have like, I don't know, 3 trunks plus like roots off of that, and you're really gonna have to commit to letting that meta mesh cook. But in the end, it will be worth it. Like, you do it the one time. Once you've got everything set, you set everything up with cylinder meshes first, get it all dialed in, copy those parameters over to your meta mesh, and go to lunch. And when you come back, you'll have something pretty sick. Once I've got this manual update is checked, I'll go in, I'll tweak the UVs just like I showed you guys, get UVs set up on this object, and start working on the shading. So you can imagine that doing vines would be very similar to this. I'm going to also do another quick video on just vines, how I do those, because normally for those I use these little points to distribute them, and I'll kind of, again, take this very similar situation. I'm going to use this same file to do the vine thing, but I'll distribute, like, I'll set a point here, maybe a point over there, a point over there, and grow the vines kind of out on the surface based off of multiple points, and create systems that way. So with that concludes our first in our, I guess, advanced GrowFX section. I hope this was useful, and I hope you guys are getting your trees looking awesome, or plants, whatever the case may be. All right.